Hello everyone and welcome along to our first webinar of 2023. As it's International Women's Day this Wednesday, we thought we'd host an event with two female founders to tell us about their experience of why they chose self-employment right through to the experiences they've had since they started their businesses. We have on my left we have Ashley Watson here from Copper Square Communications, who some of you may recognise from a previous webinar we did during the tail end of last year. And on my right we have Suzanne McAnaney from Lemonade Marketing. So thanks very much for joining us today, ladies. If we could start with you, Ash, could you tell us a little bit about your career background before you started Copper Square and then how it all came into existence?
I'm going to be giving away age with this question now, Peter. So I started way back in 2004 working in PR for a local mental health charity, and it was very much driven by issuing news releases. So it was writing the news release, faxing it to the Belfast Telegraph, and then waiting on the paper to come out to cut it out of the paper, stick it on the sheet and put it in a Polly pocket. That's how my career started. And so I've worked very generally in sort of marketing, communication based roles through a number of voluntary and education organisations. And in 2015 was head of comms for a local council and loved the job, but at the same time was pregnant, and Lucy was born a month early, and with that came a lot of sort of health issues. So now, touch wood, she is a very happy and healthy little girl, and if you saw her you wouldn't know that she was any different than any other 8-year-old. But the health issues are quite unique in that she requires hospital appointments every 12 weeks. And at the very start, there was a lot of running back and forth to the hospital to see physios and speech therapists and craniofacial doctors and consultants that I didn't even know existed. So it was a bit of a crash course into parenting to start with. And then this little tiny person needed extra special care. So her condition is called Beckwith-Wiedemann syndrome, or BWS for short. And if you were to Google it, you would jump off the pier. So you just get sort of worst case scenarios there. But Lucy's at increased risk of developing childhood cancer. So the scans are really important, and it's really important that they happen every 12 weeks. And I worked for a very understanding employer who said, you can have off as often as you need. There's no issues here. We want you to come back. But I couldn't do it. I just couldn't go back into that environment where I felt having to ask for the time off every 12 weeks or take hospital appointments, and the employer were supportive, but you sort of felt then maybe the rest of your colleagues or your team, or where's she away to today, or this or that or the other. And so I really wanted that flexibility, and it was the flexibility that actually really, that want for flexibility that really helped me to start Copper Square. So Lucy was 6 months old, and we were about to get married as well, so just do all life's big stressful events in one go. And I started Copper Square from the kitchen table with one client, and swapped the 9 to 5 for the 24/7 of self-employment.
With a baby?
With a baby, yeah. But it was just that, I suppose, having my own business had always been at the back of my head.
That was my next question, actually. Had it been on the radar?
Yeah,
or something you wanted to try?
It had been on the radar for something I wanted to try, and it was always that cushion of, when you're working for somebody, you have maternity pay, you have sick pay, you have holiday pay, you have a pension, whereas the security of it, and then you go self-employed and you have to adult by yourself, and that was kind of the kick up the backside that I needed. Just that, do you know what, now there's never the perfect time, but now seems like a good time to start my own business.
Okay, and tell us a little bit about what Copper Square's doing then.
Yeah, so with a background in sort of very general marketing communications, I decided to specialise in social media. So using social media to tell people's stories, to connect them with their customers. So still bringing that skill set of PR and writing and that creativity, but using the social media platforms. So no longer faxing, but posting.
Getting your Polly Pocket
getting
out.
the Polly Pockets out, yeah. Still love a good Polly Pocket.
I miss my laminator, you know.
I'm really jealous you had a laminator.
That's fancy, Peter.
Early days of my career, I remember I had a laminator and just printing stuff off using word art. Do you remember the joys of
Word art.
printing stuff off and laminating things. It was great. I loved it. Used to pass hours doing that stuff.
Busy.
Yeah. What about you, Suzanne? Could you tell us a little bit about your background and how Lemonade came into existence?
Sure. So I must be a little bit younger, dare I say. So I started out probably just over 10 years ago. So I'd studied English at Queen's. And really didn't know what I wanted to do, other than I just loved words. And I kind of fell into PR, did an internship at City Magic, and loved PR. And I was working in their PR department and so on. From there, graduated the usual sort of path of working for a big agency. Was there for 6 years, loved it. Morrow Communications, fabulous agency, fabulous bunch of people, loved it. Then my dream job came up with the Bianca Group. So I went there. And then I met a man from Derry. So
The rest is history.
you notice the shift in the tone there.
Many stories have ended with that.
Yeah. So long story short, I found myself having to move an hour and a half up the road, and kind of had to change everything. So moved up to the sticks and got a job with a company in Derry. About maybe 3-4 months before the pandemic hit. You can imagine where the rest of this story goes. Unfortunately, I was made redundant. So it was a case of I was living in the middle of nowhere, about to get married. And the opportunities for marketing in the Northwest at that time, probably there wasn't as many as what there would have been in the past, just given the nature of everything that everybody was going through. And I just decided, now or never, give it a go. And Lemonade was born, and it was that notion of when life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. So I had a lot of experience in a lot of different areas because I had worked for a big agency, working with big clients. I had that. Also working in hospitality, and then working kind of in cybersecurity and IT, and that sort of notion of agency model and in-house model. So I felt I'd seen a lot kind of over that period of time, and I felt that there was something unique I could bring. And I was very fortunate. I really just hit the ground running and just started getting out there, started meeting people, and 2.5 years later, I really haven't looked back.
Do you think that combination of the agency and the in-house experience gave you a better idea of how you could do what you do to do it better, maybe, or do it
100%.
Differently to the way it was currently being done?
I was in a unique position because I had the experience of both being an agency and being a client. Because whenever I was with Bianca, we worked with a number of great agencies as well. So I'd had that experience of both sides of the coin. And I think whenever I set up my own business, it gave me a really unique take on how to talk to clients, the expectations, how to communicate your work, and things like that I wouldn't have had I have not had the in-house experience.
Okay. I mean, obviously, the PR and the agency background obviously helped at the start. I mean, there was a lot of publicity around. I remember at the time whenever you started the business, and that background must have helped at the start of that process to get, to launch yourself and make people aware of.
Yeah, the reason why I did the PR was actually for a different reason. It wasn't really to kind of push the business per se. At the time when I had been made redundant, nobody else around me had been made redundant, and also I had been in a position where, I came straight out of uni, got a really good job, had been working at quite a high level for quite some time, and being redundant had never, ever came into my head. Yeah. Never in a million years. And I know everyone says, oh, it's the position that's made redundant, not the person. But you try telling that to somebody who's been made redundant. And at that time, nobody else I knew was being made redundant. And I felt that if I could tell my story and it could help somebody, to make them feel, because I was embarrassed, I was ashamed, and I felt like I had done something wrong. And it was that thing of, if somebody who's feeling like me right now maybe sees this in the paper, because I had it in the Sunday Life and different bits and pieces, and it was that thing of, if one person reads this and it makes them feel better about their situation, or if someone else is made redundant later. So that was actually why I went really big on telling the story. And it's not something until today that I've really talked about since, but that was kind of my main reason for doing that,
Okay. Was there anything in particular? I mean, you mentioned, Ash, that it was always on the radar to be potentially to try something yourself, and it was for me too. But what was it about being employed was it something about being employed that made you consider self-employment, or was it something that you just felt that suited you better?
I think it's a bit of both, to be honest with you. I think my personality, I've got quite a strong personality. I'm not a yes person. not a yes person. So I think sometimes that is quite a good skill to have when you're running your own business, because you're second questioning everything that you do. But it was the inflexibility of the workplace that really prompted me to start my own business. And I have staff now, and I'm really keen that we have a much more flexible approach to work. You can have your lunch when you're hungry, not because it's 12 o'clock.
Yeah,
you know that sort of thing. So that was sort of what prompted me to start Copper Square.
Okay, and what about you, Suzanne? Was it on the radar for you before you decided to do lemonade?
In a way, my dad was self-employed, and I always said I would never be self-employed
It's
because I
funny
saw
you say
how
that.
hard he had to work.
We did a freelancing episode last year with Francesca Morelli.
Yes, I know.
And she was saying this, because the Morellis, coming from a family where they've been running their own businesses, and she said it's funny, when she was growing up, it was she would have said, I never want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I want to go and get a job in a company and work somewhere, because I see how hard my parents have had to work, and I don't know whether it's right for me. But then she's ended up running her own agency, and it's that nature versus nurture sort of question, is it? If it's there, it's there.
Yeah, so I think, so I said my dad was self-employed, and I'd always said, no, I don't want to do that. I feel, again, similar to yourself, Ash, it was kind of in my personality a little bit. I've always been pretty confident, pretty driven, pretty ambitious, and I feel that this was always going to happen. I feel like this was always going to be on the cards, no matter what kind of path I took. So it had been in my head, but I think sometimes life can give you a little nudge, and that was what the case was for me, because there was no reason to say at that time. I could have waited it out and got a job, I could have, but I didn't want to. It was a case of, no, this feels like the right thing to do.
Do you think that you have to be predisposed to be optimistic in order to be able to give it a go? Because back to your comment about starting lemonade and being made redundant, and it's more complex than this, but you can either take the hit on the confidence that inevitably that's going to give anybody, and let that dictate what happens next, or decide that you're not going to let that dictate what happens next and try and do something different. I've
never thought about it like that before, but it's so true. I think it is in those moments, it's kind of where you find where your mettle is. It's that thing of, it's do or die, and you just have to go for it.
Yeah. What about you? I mean, what's
it's sort of very similar, because I was made redundant 2 years before I'd started Copper Square, and it's that case of, that kind of gives you that confidence, I think, to say, and it was quite interesting, you're saying it's the role that's made redundant, not the person. And I actually hadn't got that in my head. I was like, I've been made redundant. Yes. I am therefore redundant. I can't do, which is nonsense, because
it's just such
of course you can.
Word.
It is a horrible word.
It is.
Yes.
It is a horrible word.
Invent a better word for that.
Yeah, that'll be the next next on the list.
I mean, moving on then from you've made the decision, you've got off and running. One of the things I know from my own experience was, I had the security blanket of, the big successful organization that I worked for previously, and all the kudos that came with that, and all the benefits that came with that for your future potential career moves and things that you wanted to do. Suddenly you're on your own. Did we start with you, Ash? Did you actively seek out any support networks or any groups or whatever that you could go to that would help you through that early stage?
Yeah, because I don't come from an agency background, so I was very much an in-house marketer, so I didn't start the business with a group of even slightly lukewarm leads. There was very sort of little in terms of business connections. So it was really important for me to get out and to network and start to build up, this is who I am and this is what I do. And I started by looking geographically, locally to where I lived. And at that time I lived in Bangor, and I saw a networking group that met weekly. So I'll go along to that. So went along to it, really nervous, didn't know a sinner in the room. That thing of you walk in and you look about, and so I did what I'd been reading you're supposed to do, and that was, go up and, introduce yourself to, or go and listen, and what are people talking about and where can you add value to the conversation. So that's what I did. And so I walked up to this group who happened to be 3 men, and this guy turned around to me and said, we're okay for coffee, thanks, love. And the ground could have opened up and swallowed me. I was mortified, and I didn't know what to do or say.
What did you do?
I left.
Really?
I was mortified. No, I think if he said it to me now, I might be a bit quicker with a response. But at that point, I just put the coffee down and I left, and I was like, I'm never going back. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing it. And then I started to look a bit smarter at the groups that I was going to join, or at least spend my time, going to. So I joined actually female networking groups. So I joined Women in Business, I joined Mums at Work, and I joined the Ulster Bank Accelerator, which is not female specific, but is a very structured and a really good kind of business group to be part of. Yeah. So it was a bit more strategic about the groups that I joined and attended. But yeah.
And what would, given your experience of the Ulster Bank Accelerator, which I did too, and the groups like Women in Business and the Mums at Work, how are they different in terms of what they give you at that early stage, do you think?
I think it's because they're more understanding and open to where you are on that business journey. So you're starting from scratch, like you're literally starting with the blank page in the notebook, and they're welcoming to your ideas, and it's, do you know who you need to talk to? Have you thought about this? And they're really good at connecting you with people that you need to be connected with. Yeah. Okay. And to me, that's what networking is. It's not going with the pack of business cards and firing them out to everybody. It's listening and doing your elevator pitch. It's listening to, well, how can I help this person? I'm this further on in my journey.
What was your experience whenever you started? I mean, I suppose question for both of you, around how supportive people were whenever you started the business and willing to open doors and give you opportunities?
In the business world, I've actually found it to be really supportive. I think I had a harder sell at home in convincing, like my dad's self-employed as well, and when I said I was going to start my own business, he did everything to try and talk me out of it. But that's a protective thing of course. Too. I have found if you ask the questions, people will generally want to help. And one of the key things I learned from the Ulster Bank Accelerator was to actually look at your own network and who do you already know within your own network. And it sounds so obvious, but it made a big difference to my business.
What about you?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think my journey was slightly different because my business was founded in COVID. So there wasn't any in-person networking. So I found at the beginning I very much leveraged people I already knew, in particular individuals. And it was really, I had a lot of support in the beginning. I think a lot of people, I suppose it was kind of coming from the agency model, whilst it wasn't a case of I was working with any clients I'd previously worked with. I knew the power of networking and I knew the power of reaching out to people. So it was a case of, as you say, going through your Rolodex and contacting people. And it really did surprise me how many people were willing to help me, did want to give me advice. And I suppose really moving on from that, it was a case of I worked with Starticus, the startup agency, Alistair Cameron, who's amazing, and he set up a female, it just so happened to be female founder, it was Impacting Founders was the program, and it was all online during COVID, and I did that for 6 weeks, and it was really, really helpful. So that was kind of my first taste of more official networking. Everything else had been person to person, people I'd met along over the years and things like that. But it really, I think when you run your own business, it can be a very lonely place. And I feel from a networking perspective, having that balance of individuals, even people like yourselves, who who you can phone up and have a chat with, who are doing essentially the same thing that you're doing, but having that balanced with the bigger groups, the likes of, the Women in Business or whatever it might be, and kind of taking what you need from all those different sources to help you get the answers that you need on your journey.
Okay. Since one of the other things I wanted to ask you, one of the things I looked forward to, I was looking forward to most whenever I decided to start the agency, was not having a boss. I pity anybody who was my boss. You know, because I just kept asking why all the time, to the point where, you know, your children sometimes say why one more time.
Try me.
Right.
Try me.
But as soon as I started the business, almost subconsciously, I started looking for people to be accountable to.
Yeah, it's very true.
Because I thought, you know, if I'm just sitting here having these conversations with myself all the time, then, you know, I can fudge the answer, can't I? You know, I can make an excuse as to why that hasn't happened or why I haven't done this thing that I think is a good idea, but I just haven't got round to yet. Is that something you found from within your own networks, trying to find those people who, you know, you make a commitment that what you're going to do next, knowing that the next time you meet, whether it be an informal coffee or whether it be part of a more formal business group, you know people are going to ask you, well, how's that thing going? And you're like, I better have moved it a little bit at least, you know, before I get asked the question. Yeah,
you need the sounding board, because it is, as I said, a lonely place, and you do need that sort of external pair of ears to kind of, even just, not even from an accountability point of view, just to get you out of your own head. You know, whenever you work for yourself, it's you and that laptop day in, day out a lot of the time, and you need that external perspective to sometimes get you out of that situation, or to, you know, to give you a different look at things. And I would recommend having a good accountant. He'll keep you accountable. I know mine did, you know, and they keep you right, you know, because that's the thing about accountants, you know, they're black and white. It's, you know, this is the money coming in, this is the money going out, this is your projections, and this is what's happening. And there's no fluff, there's no, you know, ability to fudge it, as you say. So I think invest in a good accountant would be one thing I would suggest you do, because they will keep you accountable and keep you on track and tell you when you're, you know, not on track. I remember one of the pieces on the Ulster Bank Accelerator, someone said once, you know, you can try lots of different things and get them wrong and start again, but you only run out of money once. So true. So true. So true. What about you in terms of the networking and being accountable to people?
Yeah, I've really benefited from having a mentor.
Okay.
And actually through through the accelerator, Matt was my mentor. Yeah. And one of the things he said to me was, you work for Copper Square, so you need to get this mindset of, even if you set, like, you don't need to literally sit and have a conversation with yourself, but you can if you want. But, you know, sit and have a meeting with yourself and, you know, set targets. By this week, I will have achieved X, Y, and Z. Yeah. Have you done those things? Who is holding you accountable? And there's nothing like sitting across the table from a mentor saying, have you done these things? And why not? And why not if you haven't? So, and you can get a mentor at any stage of your business. Yeah. I think it's really important to know that there are organisations out there that offer that. And I mean, we're all too close to the things that we do, that sometimes you can't see the opportunities that lie outside of that. So having those people who bring different experiences from, I mean, Matt's background, I mean, Matt talked a lot in the accelerator about the coaching he did with some of the NFL teams, you know, on mindset stuff. Yeah. And you know, that was massively valuable to know that people are bringing these different perspectives that you haven't considered yet, you know, and that can help you figure out what the next decision you have to, because there is an element, you touched on it before we went on air here, Suzanne, around, you know, male or female, whatever stage of your journey you're at, you know, the leader of the organisation, or the person at the top of the organisation, or the person who's managed to get themselves the top job in the organisation, whether that's because they found it or because they were promoted to it, there's a perception sometimes that I can't show any sign of weakness or vulnerability here, because if I do that, if you have your own team, that's going to impact them. So I have to just be infallible. You know, I have to be the face of optimism and joy all the time, even when they're the last two feelings that I'm feeling at the minute. You know, because I'm worried about what effect it will have either on the team or on my clients if I am not. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's something that we can all relate to. I think there is this sense of that we all put on a bit of a mask to the world sometimes, don't we? And especially when you have your own business, and if you are kind of on your own in that business without staff and so on, you feel everything hinges on you. Yeah. And if you let that mask slip, as it were, you're actually, you know, you're going to, you know, your clients are going to think, oh, she's not reliable, she's not this, she's not that. Where in reality, often we connect more when we're more human. You know, for me, for example, you know, the example I was given was, you know, I have an 18-month-old daughter, and
whenever she started childcare, you know, what does it say when they start childcare? You know, they get this and they get that and they get the plague, you know. So I had a period of time where she was off ill, you know, continually for, you know, like, you know, a couple of weeks at a time, every couple of weeks, and this kept happening. And the first 2 times I didn't tell my clients because, and it was completely me. It was my own internal perception that, oh, they're going to think that the work's going to slip. I'm not going to get this done. I'm not going to get that done. But it actually put more pressure on me because I was trying to look after her, trying to keep the business going and not telling anybody. So the second or third time it happened, I had a conversation with all of my clients and explained the situation. And they were 3 guys, Gareth Dunlop from Fathom, Jason Fahey from Police Cube, and Kieran from Satori Accounting. And they could not have been nicer. They were so understanding. It was whatever you need, whatever we can do to help you. And it just made me realise, and I'll be forever grateful, you know, for that conversation, because it not only helped me out at that time, but it shifted my whole perspective that, do you know what, yeah, I'm a business owner, but I also have other stuff going on. And, you know, the ceiling didn't fall in, you know, the work continued and everything got done. And it was literally, you know, in the grand scheme of things, a little dot. And I think that's something we can all learn from, is sometimes when we actually be a bit more human and share who we are, the work can be better.
I mean, in your situation as well, Ash, I mean, you know, I'm sure you had those initial feelings as well whenever with Copper Square and with Lucy having, you know, the health problems.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I haven't spoken about Lucy's health. You know, there's very few people know that about her, and part of that is that I don't want her to be treated differently because she's not sick. Like, she is a perfectly happy and healthy little girl, and I've never sort of wanted her to have that label. And the flip side is that I felt that internalized thing of, well, people are going to think I'm not reliable, or, you know, you feel when you're the business owner and, you know, you are the business, that you have to be contactable 24/7. You know, oh, that's a client on the phone, I have to stop what I'm doing to go and do. And there has to be a happy medium with that. And so, yeah, it's been like, I actually haven't spoken to, I didn't do what you did and spoke to your clients and said, look, this is what's going on. I put things in place whereby I have, like, if I was to get hit by a bus or if I go off sick, you know, here are people who can pick up on the work and can cover things, so to try and get like holidays and things like that. Do you remember those?
It's one of the things I've actually been very good at right from the very start was, you know, I'm taking my holidays. Because, and I think a lot of that came from the culture of the organisation I was in before.
Prior.
They were very adamant that everybody took their holidays, and your manager, whatever department you were working in, would have been like, you've got days to take. You need to go away from here for a while because you're useless to us unless your batteries are fully recharged and rested. That's why the holidays are there. They're not there. We don't give you them because we have to. We do have to. But, you know, you can't function without a reset every now and again. So true. And your performance and everything is going to dip. So one of the things I was very aware of from the start was, you know, just be, like, I work for Blue Sky.
Yes.
That back to what you said earlier, you know, you work for Copper Square. You know, and I still have, we use Timetastic for our holiday bookings, you know, and I'm looking at how many holidays do I have left. People think, oh, so you can go off anytime you want.
That's a great idea.
But you can't. You know, so I'll you know, we allocate everybody in the team gets the holiday bookings, and you have to actually.
That's a really good.
That's a really. I'm going to take that away. That's a great idea.
And that for me is like, because if I don't do that, I know I won't take them. And I mean, we have again, brought in from my previous businesses, it was, you know, you can carry 5 over, but you're not carrying any more than 5 over. And that's not because I'm being mean and miserable and saying you're not getting, it's because, you know, use them. Make sure you use them. And I have been carrying holidays over, but I take as many holidays as I think I need. You know, and we went to a 4-day week again for the same reasons, you know, just to give ourselves that extra space, because in all of the things we do, creativity and it's the quality of the creative ideas that we come up with that is our currency. And once they start becoming shit, you know, we can't sell the things that we were previously selling. That's the value that we're saying. People going, I couldn't have done that myself. I needed that creativity coming from there in order to give me the results. So you need to put the mechanisms in place, I suppose, to give yourself the space to go and do that, I think.
So true.
Going on to that agency model, and I suppose it goes back to your previous point, Suzanne, about having done the agency and done in-house. What do you think are some of the questions being asked about that current agency model at the minute, and how are you in what you're doing with Lemonade trying to change those things?
I've definitely noticed, I think cost of living has a lot to do with it. I'll tell you where I'm going with this. So really I have noticed a move. So typically in that sort of agency model, it's this kind of retainer notion whereby you have a series of clients, you quote them a number of days and you're working with them month on month, and that's really how this whole thing functions, this whole engine operates. And that was very much the case for Lemonade for quite some time. As I said, I'm only at this 2.5 years, and it's interesting in those 2.5 years how I have seen how the market has changed. I would say since kind of cost of living has come up and all of this stuff, in the past 6 months, I have seen a movement. I don't know if you have experienced this as well, but a movement to more project work where people want things. So they want
people want stuff.
Yeah, you want a thing, something that you can actually, for want of a better phrase, so they want this particular activity, PR around it. We want a website written. We want a brochure written. We want whatever it is, a particular thing. And I'm seeing less and less for my type of work being that kind of monthly retainer model. And it raises a lot of questions because whilst I still do have retainers that I work with and I've got great relationships with those, there is this slight movement away from that. And the beauty of the retainer model, and I do very much kind of fly the flag of that, is that you develop a relationship with us. We get to know you. You get to know us. That creativity you're talking about can really flourish, when you work with somebody month on month for years, rather than just doing a one-off thing. The things are important, don't get me wrong. And it's great to have it as a shiny thing to look at, but we need the strategy and we need the relationship, and that, in my opinion, can only really evolve, naturally over time. And I feel whenever you are kind of a freelancer, for want of a better phrase, you can be more agile, you can be more personal. I would describe myself as an intuitive marketer. I would very much say I always meet my clients in person and I try to get a feel of what it is that they're about, what it is their business is. And because it's just me, and I don't mean just me, but because I work alone, it's that case of you and I are going to develop this relationship really, really well. And then the beauty of this is then you can bring in other collaborators, whereas if you're in an agency and yes, you're all singing, all dancing, you can do video, you can do design, you can do advertising, you can do PR. The beauty of, I think, of being in my position is I have a whole network, going back to that network, of various creatives that I work with from lots of different places, who are designers, who work in video, who do social media, who are actually specialists in their area. So you can kind of be a bit of a matchmaker and really marry the right people together for that particular client.
Okay, and what about you, Ash, on that side of things, in terms of the way you organise the work that you do for your clients?
Yeah, that sort of, so we would have a good working relationship with clients on a retainer model, because with social media, it's very difficult to kind of just do, unless it's an advertising campaign, it's very difficult to do that one-off piece, and it has to be entirely strategy driven and part of a bigger marketing, like your overall has to link in with your overall marketing strategy, which really surprises clients when you sit down and say, what are your marketing objectives? And they go, well, I just want you to do my Facebook, and it's like, well, let's bring this back in a wee bit here. But I very much work off that sort of like boutique agency model whereby I would bring in people who are experts within that particular sector. So video, PR, design, SEO, Google Ads, and work with people who have been doing that for 10, 15, 20, whatever number of years that might be. So, and that works well, and you're then working with the best, and that type of work is short term, is more come in and deliver on this project, and you're bringing in like the delivery team, and then you're away again. But what I have found is the clients will come back and say, can you do, we've got another pot of money to do something, can you do?
It's funny because we developed a video as a service product, which is a sort of bit of a hybrid thing between the traditional retainer model and project work, in that it is typically 12-month content plans, but there are agreed outputs.
Yeah, so it's that combination.
And that comes from me working as an in-house marketer and being No, I wasn't necessarily that uncomfortable with the agency model. We used PR agencies and web agencies and all that stuff. And, you know, we were buying a certain number of developer days or PR consultant days. I always felt where it became difficult was in justifying the value that was adding whenever I was reporting on how we were spending our budget. You know, because you're essentially buying days. And I mean, we get asked all the time in videos, I'm sure you guys do as well, what's your day rate? And my standard response is we don't have one. You know, we will agree a package of work for a fee that gives you the assets that you think that you require over a period of time. But I mean, it's not based off a day rate, because I think with some of our, we do 50-60% of our work manufacturing and engineering because of the background I came from. You know, I think we can get to the right answer more quickly than somebody else can. I don't think we should be paid more for that, not less. Yeah, just because we can get there more quickly. You know, so we're not on the clock. It's the quality of the creative assets that you're creating, or the quality of the solutions that you're coming with, and the results that they're delivering for the clients. So Video as a Service was an attempt to sort of merge all the great things about retainers, which from a commercial perspective for an agency are longer term view revenue, ability to invest in the team,
like that one.
you know, all that stuff. With the project work, which clients like, because it becomes transactional. You know, you said you were going to deliver me these 5 videos. I've now got these 5 videos, so I suppose I need to pay you. You know, and it sort of combines
it's more quantifiable.
The best of both of those things. You know, you've said to me this package of work is worth that much to you, so let's do that over the course of a year. And we're often rolling back people's expectations about what they can achieve in a year, because very often it's not about our capacity, it's about the internal capacity that's going to be required to deliver that as well.
Yeah, cause it's
because we're like, you know, if you're going to deliver all of this, we're going to need at least 15 to 20 days of your people's time over the course of the night. Can you sure you can give us that? Because we won't be the hold up, but we want to make sure your internal capacity can deliver the things that you want to deliver. So I think there is more of a move. When I started this, people have said to me, "What, you're just doing video?"
Yeah, that's interesting.
Like, well, yes, there's not enough going on video. You need to be doing all the other stuff too. But it's funny, whenever one of the things that the Ulster Bank entrepreneur Matt used to talk a lot, and John Ferris used to talk an awful lot about the inch wide, mile deep thing. You know, and it's whenever you're actually looking at what essentially moving image stuff involves, there's so many things that you can be doing.
Avenues.
That, you know, we're doing animation, we're doing webinars and live streaming, we're doing ads, we're doing social media content. There's so much moving image stuff that you can do that actually it's really valuable to niche down and say, whether that's sectorally or specialism wise, and say, you know, this is what we do best and this is who we do it for.
Yeah.
And knowing when to pass an opportunity on, because like you said, somebody in your network, whether it's a designer or a web developer, might be better placed for that particular project. And just being the linker is sometimes the thing that doesn't kill the opportunity, because it means another one is going to come, because you're trying to get, sometimes in the full service agency model, you know, I always found there was a temptation for them to try and sell you services because they had bums on seats that they needed to keep busy, rather than necessarily being, this is work that you actually need.
Yeah. And is it the right fit?
Because you're driven by the overhead rather than what the client actually wants. So it was trying to shift it back to be actually closer to the customer and what they want to get out of working with you. Absolutely. Can you tell us about some of the challenges that, you've touched on some of them, I suppose, Ash, if we can start with you, some of the challenges that you faced in starting your own business?
Do you know, in all honesty, one of the biggest challenges is around time.
Right.
So when you, and it's maybe a bit of a contradiction because I've spent so far saying I want flexibility, and then I have all this time and I can't manage it myself. So, but it was quite easy at the start to get dragged into things that weren't work related. So could you help, friends and family, maybe, could you help with this? Could you do this? And you're like, yeah. And then you get to the end of the month and you'd be like, oh, I have no money. Oh, that's because I had lunch every day
Who
last week.
Who am I invoicing this month?
Yeah,
oh, that's right,
yeah,
no one.
Me. I found out quite quickly that I quite liked being a lady what lunched, but then
who wouldn't?
That's not a very sustainable business model. So, actually being strict with yourself around your own time, and taking it seriously as a business, So that was a challenge for me, around just even putting yourself out there. You know, everybody says, oh, just do it, just do it. It's really hard to just do it.
Really true.
It's really hard. And, you know, picking the right networking events, going to the events, people thinking you're the waitress, you know, all these things just kind of are niggling in at the back of your head. So I suppose, but yeah, the biggest challenge was, because I didn't come from that agency background, I wasn't known, and I was starting from scratch, with a background. I have a degree in English from Queen's as well, so quite similar.
It's like an alumni meeting.
Yeah. People are very good at pigeonholing you into one thing. So it's like, well, you've only worked in charity, you've only worked in education, therefore that's all you can market. And it's like, well, actually, these are skills that are transferable across the whole lot of different industries. So that was a bit of a challenge as well. And linking into what you were talking about, not just taking the work because you feel that you need the work. So looking at the project, looking at doing a bit of due diligence on the company or the person and saying, is this something I want to get involved with? Does this actually excite me? Or am I just taking it because I feel I need to bring in the amount of money to justify my ladies what lunch lifestyle? But so those were sort of things at the start that were challenges. But every day's a school day and you learn from it.
Very true.
What about you, Sue?
I would say dealing with the lows and the highs. You know, they say it's, you know, a roller coaster running a business, and it really is. And there will be peaks and troughs in your business, and I think that's something really everyone has to understand, is that when you have a business, you're not just going to be riding the crest of a wave the whole time. And at the start, you know it's going to be hard. You know, we were chatting earlier about how you have all the doomsday conversations and things like that. But I personally think it's harder later on whenever you get a few knockbacks, because at the start, you know, even in your first year, you're constantly telling yourself this is going to be really hard, this is really difficult, and you're going to get no, and you have to keep fighting and all the rest of it. But whenever you get into the business a little bit and then you get no, that's really hard to deal with, because you've been, you know, earning a certain amount of money, delivering a certain amount of work, and then all of a sudden it can change like that. And that is the thing of running a business. It doesn't matter, it's not unique to marketing, it's, you know, any business is going to have peaks and troughs. So I would say that has been a challenge for me, is getting my head around that, because it's everything in your instinct, you know, is going against that. You know, if you get a few no's or a few knockbacks or even a bad month, it's, you know, your body, you know, you're trying to protect yourself, and it is a hard thing to get your head around.
It's
so
funny, there's a great line from, it was from Mike Tyson, actually, whenever he was fighting Frank Bruno. And Frank Bruno had said in the pre-match press conference, you know, that he had a plan to beat Mike Tyson. And Mike Tyson was asked about it, and he said, Frank Bruno said he's got a plan to beat you. And Mike Tyson said, everybody's got a plan till they get punched in the face.
That's it. It's so true. It's so true, though. That's it. It
you
is.
know, and it is. And I remember there was a lady who did one of the great thing about the Ulster Bank Entrepreneur Accelerator, where there were businesses there at different stages of their development.
Yep.
So there were great presentations from people who were 1 year, 2 year, 3 years down the road, and had dealt with the things that were keeping you awake at night. And there was a great presentation from a woman, and I can't remember her name now for my shame, who had developed a new solar panel. And she talked in her presentation around in Lombard Street in Belfast around how she dealt with the knockbacks early on. And I'm not sure if this was something she said or something that somebody had said to her, but she said, you just got to remember, a no isn't a no, it's a not yet.
So true. So true.
You know, and you either need to go away and think, why is it a not yet? Is it a not yet because I haven't sold it properly? I haven't articulated the value that I'm adding properly? Or is it a not yet because their business just doesn't need that at the minute, but might need it in the future?
Yeah.
And I think it's back to your, I suppose, the earlier point about how you deal with a redundancy situation. You know, you either take a no and say, okay, well, I'll just walk away here, I'm done, or you take a step back and say, okay, but why is it a no? And if it's a no because there is no opportunity, well, that's okay, and it's not. it's the opportunity that they've said no to, not you. It's back to it's the first
You
position
versus
that's been
role.
made redundant rather than the role.
Absolutely, yeah. I think probably the other challenge is trusting yourself. Listening to that, we were chatting about this earlier, about that inner voice that you have. Everyone has one, and
or two.
yeah, or 3 or 4, depending on your persuasion. But it's very important that when you have a business, because so much of the responsibility is on you, that notion of being the boss. When you're the boss, everything comes to you. You know, you're responsible for, you know, the money coming in. You're responsible for the new leads. You're responsible for delivering the work. You're responsible for deciding what direction your business is going to go in. That's a lot to shoulder. And it's really important that, I think, to mitigate against that and not get too in your head about it, that you have that instinctive voice that drove you to do this in the first place, that told you this was the right thing, and really finding a way to tune into that voice and not lose it. Because as I said at the start, you know, you're all guns blazing. I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. And as time goes on, that can waver. And it's really important that you do whatever you need to do to make sure that that voice doesn't dull, that you still listen to it, whether it's taking your holidays or, you know, structuring your time in such a way, or turning down work, walking away from work, taking a bit of a pause, whatever it is, just come back to yourself. And again, what you were saying, Ash, about not just taking things for the sake of it. You know, if you're in a bad period and, you know, you start getting loads of things in and they're not sitting right with you, you're thinking, this doesn't interest me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure, I'm fairly sure I know the answer to this question, but, you know, we've all had jobs and clients that didn't work out just the way we would have liked them to. But if we're honest with ourselves, we probably knew that when we took them.
Yeah. Again, the inner voice.
Yeah.
Never lies.
How important is it to actually spend the time and figure out, you know, what do I do and who do I do it for, and what opportunities should I say no to?
Oh, it's like that
key.
Is key. That should be the first. To me, they're the first questions you're asking yourself. If you're sitting thinking, I'm going to start my own business, then you list down the questions that you've just said and answer them, because you know then, do I have what it takes? Do I actually have a business? You know, is this something that is this a service or a product that people are willing to pay money for? Yeah. And who is going to pay? So like that's
and how can I where's the easiest route
to market?
Easiest route to an invoice.
Yeah. And it's
invoice, like
and
that
I think as well, it's about having your own values. You know, like I know I have a criteria that I ask myself with every client, and it's really simple. Its first question is, do I like them? I know that sounds really silly, but
it's really important.
Yeah, if I don't, because particularly in the nature of work that we do, going back to what I was saying about kind of wanting to build these relationships with people and things like that. And again, as a pretty intuitive person, if you don't get on with that person or you don't like them, it's not like a job where, you know, they're your manager and you have to suck it up. It's a case of, it's going to make your life difficult and also their life difficult, because sometimes we gel, sometimes we don't, and that's it, you know. So it's about, you know, I ask myself, do I like them? And I keep it really simple. Do I like them? Second of all, is the company interesting? So is it something that, you know, it mightn't be something that I'm familiar with, but, oh, does that sound cool? Do I like that? And the last thing is the work going to be creative and something I like? You know, so what's the ask? And that's my own criteria before I agree to do anything. I always ask myself those 3 things with any potential client. And I would recommend, if you are going down this path of client services, that you work out your own checklist of what matters to you. And maybe it's because of previous experience, you know, that those are the things that are important to me. The things that are important to both of you might be different. It's just... It's a totally unique
similar
exercise.
Recruiting clients is a very similar exercise, isn't it, as recruiting people? Because
it is.
Very often, not very often, but you can come across people who are very, very talented, very capable at what they do, but whenever you're out going through a recruitment process, you just think, this isn't going to work.
Yeah,
there's something about this that isn't going to work in this organization, or whether it's as a solopreneur or whether it's in a larger organization, and you're trying to think about the team dynamic that you've got already. You're interviewing a person saying, very talented, very capable, I'm just not sure that's going to fit. And it's important to try and figure that out early and understand whether it's a relationship that's going to
worth pursuing,
isn't it? Yeah,
definitely.
Okay, trying to move on to some more
positive, a little bit doom and gloom. Sorry, everyone.
What? Start with you on this one, Suzanne.
Yeah. lemonade, life gives you, making lemonade
I know,
and all that stuff.
I know. That was one of the things I noticed first when I saw your stuff. Actually, was the marketing that doesn't leave a sour taste.
Yeah.
Wasn't that one? Yeah.
Yeah, it was all about kind of sunny side up and all of that
from
stuff.
the PR background.
That's it.
What are some of the main benefits that you see of working for yourself, both personally and professionally?
I think there's a few. Getting to be master of your own destiny is a big one. I know it sounds pretty philosophical, but that notion of curating a career that you want on your terms, that would be, and as I said, having that checklist is very much a case of I can stand over pretty much most of the work I've done since I've worked with Lemonade, saying, no, I'm really proud of that, and that's work that fits with me and who I am. So I think that's the first thing, is it is fantastic to be able to be master of your own destiny. The flexibility is incredible. For me, in my own situation, as I said, I have a wee 18-month-old at home, and, I was in a position where probably it's sort of second half of last year, I was in a position where I could have went full time. I was working 3 days at that point, and I was getting a lot of work in, and I could have went full time. And I made a choice to take somebody on rather than go full time. And the reason was I know this time with Kathleen, I'm not going to get it back. So for me, it was more important to keep doing my 3 days at Lemonade and 2 days with her. And I can honestly say I don't feel like I've missed out on anything. And whilst when you're self-employed, you will work more than you've ever worked, and you're switched on a lot more. But for me, being able to have that structure was a massive part, or a massive benefit. And I think as well, the other benefit would be all the people I've met along the way. I wouldn't have met half the people that I have in the past 2.5 years, and that's during a pandemic as well, only for doing this. And it's just so interesting to get out there and meet different people, work with different companies, and there's so much amazing stuff going on.
Do you think that curiosity is a key ingredient for anybody that wants to start their own business? Because I think you have to just be interested in lots of things. I mean, as I said, we do 50-60% of work manufacturing and engineering, but we do an awful lot of other work too. And you just hear all these great stories.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're all, essentially anybody working in a marketing or comms job, it's just storytelling, isn't it?
I was literally just about to say that.
So, you come across things sometimes and you're like, there's just so much good stuff here that I just cannot wait to get my teeth into it, and it could be from so many different sectors. I think that inbuilt curiosity, I think, is a key ingredient, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And that's a big benefit, is that whenever you work for yourself, you have a vehicle that you can explore that curiosity from. Yeah. You're not kind of shut in. You can go out and say, oh, do you know what? I would like to work with them, or I would like to, get in. I think as well, it does give you that ability to diversify a little bit. Whenever I started out, I didn't really think I would get into kind of mentoring and speaking engagements like this. I'd done a little bit of speaking engagements, the odd one or two kind of previously, but not really. Whereas since I started Lemonade, it was a case of people did want to hear my story, and people did want to hear what I had to say and things like that. So that's not something I ever would have thought I would have got into. And then marketing mentoring is something I do. And again, not something I'd really done before, but again, it's that culmination of experience that has allowed me to do that. So I think that's one of the benefits, is you never know where starting your own business will take you.
Okay, what about you, Ash? What are the main benefits that you see?
Probably very similar in terms of the opportunities that are out there. So you're not having, you're able to, you can choose the work that you want to do. You can choose the clients that you want to work with, but you can also create the opportunities as well. So you can see where there's maybe a need for something else, and you can develop a new product or a new service, and it's exciting. Like yes, it has its challenges, but it's exciting because it's yours and you're the one doing it. So yes, it's not 9 to 5 and your brain never switches off, but it's your work, and with that comes an immense sense of pride. I would do some marketing mentoring as well, and I actually really enjoy that side of the work that I do. And I host a conference, and I never in a million years thought that is something that I would do, but I'm able to bring some amazing marketers to the stage in Belfast for people to listen to, and I love doing that. I love social media savvy. I think it's a brilliant event, and that's something that kind of just came about in the last couple of years. It just happens. But for me, it's just that ability to say, what have I got on? What's in the diary today? And even having that, do you know what? I need to rest. I can start, my body starting to say, you may be reaching that sort of burnout time, and I don't have client meetings in this afternoon. I'm going to go to Mount Stewart and walk the dogs.
Yeah, okay.
And I can do that. So it's really important.
Adding on to the point about an inbuilt curiosity being a potential ingredient that anybody wanting to start their own business needs is your attitude to risk.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Also an important one. I remember I've told this
It's
story so
hugely
many times, and
important.
people who have watched any previous episodes of this will have no doubt have heard this story. But it goes back to when I was on a school ski trip, and Eamon Hamill used to be the teacher. He's not with us anymore, unfortunately. But Eamon used to stand at the exit of the breakfast room every morning whenever you were walking out the door, and he used to say to everybody as they walked past, remember, if you don't fall, you're not trying hard enough. Because this shouldn't be comfortable. You know, you need to fall to know where the limit is, and then get better so you don't fall next time, and then push yourself again and go, and that way you'll really enjoy the week. And I just sort of carried that with me then throughout the whole. But you have to have this. It's back to I suppose the idea that you have to be inherently optimistic. That's part of that, isn't it? You know, your attitude to failure is as an opportunity to learn something rather than something that's going to retreat into yourself and decide that you're not going to maybe embrace those opportunities, because whenever you're developing a new product or service, it starts as an idea or another note in your phone whenever you're out for a walk, and it's like, how willing are you to take the chances that you need to take to see whether that's something that people would actually buy? And
the risks are the things that are going to keep your business growing. You know, it's taking a risk to start the business again. It's coming back to that thing of, you know, whenever you start out, it's a big risk and it's a lot and all of that. But unless you continue to take risks, calculated risks, I always say take calculated risks, your business won't grow, it won't develop, you know, it won't evolve into anything. So that notion of being a risk taker, I think, is you need to have something in your personality. Let's face it, there's all something a wee bit wrong with us, you know, sitting here, to be quite honest, you know, but it is, you need that. You do. Because otherwise you wouldn't take the knocks. You wouldn't, you know, and you wouldn't be able to see, okay, well, what's the next risk I can take? And you never know what it'll lead to.
I mean, finishing off, I'm conscious of time, so for anyone thinking about starting their own business, what advice would you give them on the preparation that they need to put in before they take the leap to give it the best chance of being successful? If we start with you,
get a mentor. Find a mentor.
Okay.
Because that's your accountability. That's your, am I going to do this thing?
Okay.
I've got an idea, and they'll really help you put a bit of structure behind it. You know, they'll help you with your market research to say, do I actually have a viable business idea? So yeah, getting a mentor is the top piece of advice.
Okay.
I think being an expert in what you do, you know, whatever it is, you know, or if it's you're making something, you know, that you know there's actually, you know, everything about it and you know everything that's going to be involved. I think if you are going to start a business, that's the only thing that's going to carry you through is kind of your reputation in a way and the quality of work that you deliver. So if you aren't confident and good at what you do, it's going to be a non-starter, because that's the only way you're going to get clients. It's the only way you're going to get business is if you're actually good at what you do.
Okay, thanks very much for joining us today. I enjoyed the chat. Yeah. I hope everybody enjoys whatever they have planned this week for International Women's Day on Wednesday. I'm looking forward to the Women's Leadership Conference at the Crown Plaza on Friday, which I think, apart from social media savvy, obviously, which I think is probably one of the best events that's put on in the whole country. So I'm really looking forward to that. So thanks everybody for joining us today. And if you keep an eye on the Future Marketing website and our channels on LinkedIn, you'll find details of what we have coming next over the next few months. So thanks again.